almost live from the CX Therapy Studio, CX Therapy Season 4.
Good morning, Max. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Julien, how is your evening? How's Paris, the city of lights? And more importantly, how's Julien?
It's hot. Paris, not Julien. But it is hot right now, which is great. I enjoy that. Almost a Californian weather. But, I like when it's a bit more chill in the evening. But yeah, I'll survive. Yeah. I'm actually super thrilled to see you today. So nothing going to stand in the way.
Great.
How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for today. We've got Sheila McGee-Smith, who's an all-star in the CX world for many, many years. So I know this is going to be a fun conversation.
So I see what's happening here. When it is Sheila, there is a spoiler. Any other guest, you don't announce it first, but when it's Sheila, you can't keep it. So
you get a little excited. You kind of can't leave it alone.
All right. Well, that sounds good. But before we talk to Sheila and about her story, can we have a quick glimpse at what happened last week? Should I call the mailbag?
I think we should. Let's see if there's anything in it.
Now it's time to open this week's mailbag.
I got the mailbag.
Look at that.
Take a look. We got something.
All right. Hey, just before you read that one, do you mind just giving a little bit of the context again? Because not everyone has watched that.
I realized that we haven't done that well enough in the past. So I was planning to do that. So Dan Miller was our guest last time from Opus Research, and his was with his internet provider, and there was a push for him to get a new router. He got the new router, and he was promised simple plug and play. That didn't work. Took it to the store. That didn't work. Tried something else. Eventually, they had to roll out a truck, and basically, when he saw what the truck guy was, 2 trucks. That's right. Roll out 2 trucks. And understanding what the guys in the trucks had to do, there was no way a mere mortal could have been able to do this simple self-service installation.
So I got to tell you something. I think the mail you've got in your hands might actually be coming from my mom. Because she does not speak English, but I took the time to translate that episode to her the other day. And throughout the entire episode, she was like, yep, that's me. Same happened to me. This is unacceptable. So that mail, if it's written in French, let me translate. That could be my mom.
So basically the question I'm getting here, we talked about this coming from a marketing thing. We're going to roll out these new ones, and somewhere somebody made a decision that this should be self-service, and the new program was rolled out, and there really wasn't clearly, the people involved were amazing, but the process was just not ready. It was too hard. It was it was disjointed. And the question here, I think it's really an excellent one, is what would it look like for them to be ready when they did roll this out?
Well, I think me being part of marketing, and you had a marketing career at some point as well, we both know how crucial collaboration and communication is, especially when your company gets big and you have silos over silos. So you get that brilliant idea from the product team. They want to build a new product to have new features, and the sales team is thinking about how to promote it, and the marketing is making a big splash out of it, and none of them think about telling the team that's going to deploy it, or informing the customer service is going to have to maintain it, and all of that is just because of silos, and it's all so common. What would it look like if they had to do it better? I think it would be just better collaboration, real internal rollout before you go to your external rollout. Because what happened the other day on that story was the marketing folks checked all the boxes. We've made noise, people signed up, but people who had to deploy it were not so happy about it. I don't know. Do you see that any different?
Yeah, it's a role in the software world that typically is owned by product management, or there's a project office. I mean, there's a readiness rollout that needs to happen, and that should be all the boxes. And I'm to your point, I'm sure they went through and they did check all the boxes, and they checked all the readiness boxes. It just, I think no one actually, well, I'm sure somebody stood up and said, why do we think consumers can do this? This is going to be really way too hard. And everybody just ignored that poor person who probably works somewhere else now just out of frustration. I think that was a lot of it. I really feel what you're saying about checking all the boxes and just, and I guess a project office and project management to go through, and, we've all been in those meetings where every department says, yes, I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready. I bet they went through that, but there wasn't the real communication of, okay, is this really ready? Does this really work?
So I'm glad you bring this up, because something we're going to touch on today, we're going to have a specific focus on an industry that's famous for having big companies with big teams, loads of complexities, gigantic processes to follow, and all of that. So that's an industry where if you do have silos, you're going to run into issues. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the banking industry, if that works for you. And I've prepared a few stats, fresh stats, to just set the stage.
Ooh, all right. I've heard of the banking industry.
Well, I've had some of your stories. Yes, you have. So has Nicholas, apparently. All right, here's the first one for you. 3.97 out of 5 is the score that give bank customers worldwide in 2024. And why am I giving you this number? Just to put it in context, the US is actually ahead. In the US, we've got a score of 4.2, while where I live in France and in the UK, we are actually below that, 3.92 and 3.73. And I'm wondering, do you think it is because French people are notoriously more grumpy than others, and therefore the score is lower? Or is there major differences in how we do banking in the US versus the rest of the world?
I do think...
You do think French people are grumpy, right? That's what you're going to say.
No. French people are lovely, but the grump is just part of what makes them so lovely. Boy, I don't know. It's really hard. I mean, U.S. banking. I've got a thought about banking in general and U.S. banking. Banking has this schizophrenia of doing the latest, newest tech, and yet it being, for good reason, they're just so security conscious and privacy conscious and all of that. And I've always been fascinated with how, in spite of that, banking tends to be some of the first brands to roll out tech. So I think, to the extent tech is something that drives better self-service, I do think, at least in the US, there's a lot more of an aggressive approach to it. And I would imagine in Europe and France, less so, just given the GDPR and some of the other rules. So that might play a piece.
It's actually incredibly different from one bank to the other. You've got very advanced banking, and you've got some banks that are still using the same systems we're using in the 80s, or probably should I say early 2000. But I was just to close on that one, I was surprised. 4.2 is actually a pretty good score compared to some other industries. Banking is doing very good in the US, which leads me to my second stat for today. 78% of adults in the US prefer to bank via mobile app or website, and only 29% of Americans prefer to bank in person nowadays. That's 2022, so it's late end of pandemic. How do you feel about that number? Is that surprising to you? Is that obvious?
No, I only physically go to a bank when it's something so complicated that that's the only way to do it. I tend not to use the mobile app and do the pictures of the checks. When I get a check, I tend to put it in the ATM. But even then, I'm just going to the machine. I'm not going to a person.
Oh, so you do use ATM for some of the services?
Yeah, and that's a pretty good way to get cash. It's kind of hard to get cash on the mobile. Although I use every month, I seem to use a little bit less cash, and I still have a handful of checks. Like the gardener, the only real way to pay the gardener is with checks. So I have a few checks I still write, but those are even getting fewer and further between.
Okay, so let's see what you think about the last one then. 2.4%. 2.4% of Americans use telephone banking. Again, that's a 2019 stats here. So,
okay, that number blows me away. That number, I would have thought that would be much, much, much higher.
What's actually interesting is obviously telephone banking is the lowest one here in that survey. But it's everything human-centric that has decreased over the past few years. It's not just phone. It's going to the branch, talking to humans, generally speaking. And against that, you've obviously have an increase. And obviously the pandemic is a catalyzer here. But you have an increase of everything, web and app, against the drop of human-centric solutions.
Yeah.
The 2.4 is surprising for you?
Shocking. I would have thought that was 10 times that at least.
All right. Well, what about we ask our guests for today what you think about it? I think there is no more spoiler at this point. We know who that is. So I'm just going to say guest time.
And now, please welcome this week's guest, a true CX expert.
Welcome, Sheila. How are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Max. I am doing great. It's the summertime. Life's easy.
Yes. So I don't. If you heard that 2.4% of people use telephone banking anymore, is that surprising to you, or did you know that it was down that low?
See, I was not surprised, and I think about what services are made available via phone now, right? I think they've decreased the number of services. I mean, because so many people use the mobile app. I think we have a bifurcation of people who will use the app and people who walk into banks, right? And I don't think phone makes up for the people who are just going to walk into a bank. It's interesting, you and I, close in age, and so is my husband, complete going into the bank once a week to get his cash. He likes to play with cash. I mean, those people are still out there. They will decrease over time. But pure telephone banking, I think that was never something that would have been that high to begin with once mobile apps became possible.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Nobody calls to find out where the nearest branch is anymore.
Or if my check cleared,
Yeah.
So, Max, you started with the easy question. Now, I want to know, because I've seen that you were excited like a child before Christmas as Sheila was coming on stage with us. So, do you have tough questions, or do you have only lovely questions
for Sheila? So let me just introduce you a little bit, and then you can kind of add any holes I put in your resume, etc. Or I'll start with a question that'll kind of let you go wherever you want. Sheila's been in initially telephony and contact center industry for time immemorial. She has been an independent analyst since I've known her, and that's been not a trivial amount of time by any stretch of the imagination. And really works with vendors, works with end customers, very high social media profile, very much visible out there. And I guess, Sheila, the first really difficult biting question is, how did you decide to go independent? What kind of drove that?
Ooh. So interesting. Myself and Blair Pleasant, another CX analyst, were working at the same industry analyst firm. And it was at the time, a relatively small firm that had built up around the AT&T presence in New Jersey. In the 80s, there were 3 big buildings in New Jersey: Bridgewater, Bedminster, and Basking Ridge, the 3 Bs, on the same road. You could get from one to the other, in 25 minutes. But they had a need for research. And so the smaller firms grew up around that. But it was also the time before the internet. Hard to believe. But it was, yeah, exactly. He's laughing, Julien, because that was not your time. So we wrote reports. The tagline of the firm was over 300 pages of analysis. So every report had over 300 pages. And we would do things like, my first report in this market was called ACDs in the 90s.
I love the jazz hands.
And written in 1990, and it was review of the market at the time. At the time, we had standalone ACD players like Aspect and Rockwell. We had PBX integrated players, which today would be like UCAS, CCAS players, and that was AT&T, that was Rome, companies like that. And so we would I would do a profile on each of those. As part of the report, I'd be going out and doing, I did market share, I did market projections, but why did I leave? Both Blair and I found 2 things. One, the company wasn't making the transition to an internet world as quickly as they needed to. They continued to supply the research libraries of AT&T, Bell South, companies like that, the big vendors who still had, we had an information resource center when I worked at AT&T. I was there before, right? And it was you could get all this kind of research. And so they weren't making that transition well. So that was number one. Nobody wanted those 300-page reports anymore. And also more information that we traditionally put into those reports was available by just going on the internet, right? We were doing things like putting in information from data sheets that we went to trade shows to get that were not easy to get, right? But that the whole model changed with the internet. And the second thing that happened was our personal brands became bigger than the brand of the company that we worked for. And so we began to feel like, I'm not the salesperson, but the fact that Sheila McGee-Smith is writing it is selling this report. And Blair felt the same way. And as you know, there's published work when you're an analyst at an analyst firm, but there's also the custom work that you do for enterprises, as you mentioned, or you do for vendors. And we felt like we were bringing that work in. So long story short, we both left because we thought we could do better on our own than we did with this firm. The firm ended up collapsing.
So you did better on your own.
Yeah, we definitely did. Both of us left, within 6 months of one another in 2000. So I've been an independent for 21 years. Or no, I'm sorry, I keep saying 24 years. But what's interesting is that the independent, we were really leaders in this independent world, right? I mean, this was before constellation research, picking up the stars in the independent world. This was before that was really happening. And so we were groundbreakers there, but we were also groundbreakers in remote work. 'Cause one of the reasons I became an analyst is my husband and I were both at AT&T when we married in the late 80s. At one point there was a riff of some kind, and I had an MBA and he didn't, so I could walk out on the street and get another job pretty quickly, as I did. But he started going up the ranks, the sales ranks at AT&T. And in those days, what that meant is a new job every couple of years. You would do a job for a couple of years, and then you'd go back to headquarters, get your promotion, go back out and get a bigger account. And so I'll never forget the day he came home and said, guess what? I got promoted. We're moving to Dallas. So yeah, I'm a native New Yorker. The time we're living 30 minutes from downtown New York. I was less excited than he was. And probably Dallas was less excited to welcome me at the time as a native New Yorker. But over the course of 20 years, we had 12 different homes. We lived in New York, California, Dallas, Amsterdam, near Amsterdam, in Wassenaar, Belgium. We were in Belgium. So back in New Jersey several times, popping back in and out of Jersey, and then finally in New Hampshire. So it became easy to be an analyst because it was a portable job. I could still have the career that I had, and it was quite portable. And so it worked out really well.
Wow. That's funny. It fit your life as well as anything else at that point.
Yep.
That's great.
If you don't mind me jumping in, I actually, just to continue the conversation we were starting just before you joined us, we talked a little bit about banking. And one of the things that we've noticed with Max is a change in the way consumers and customers engage with brands, especially in the banking industry. So I've got a question for you, the both of you, just to see whether you get a sense of how things are working in the banking industry these days. How different generations are accessing their bank account these days.
Oh, it's clearly all telephone banking.
I'm sorry, walking banking.
It's even more interesting because Sheila, you were talking about the fact that you still see people going on a weekly basis to the physical bank to get their cash. Max is still using ATM for more than just getting cash from the machine. None of you guys seems to be using phone banking for good reasons that you mentioned earlier, Sheila. Any guess? Is it roughly the same thing for old generation? Do you believe there are major gaps? How do you see that usage across generations?
Okay, I want to jump in first. I'm the guest. That's my privilege. I've decided it's my privilege. I have found it very interesting interacting with my nieces and nephews as they leave school and get their first jobs, and the fact that they don't bank the same way that we bank. They don't have checks. Everything is electronic. If you want to give them money, you can't wire, like, for example, a large amount of money for whatever purpose that might be. You have to find some, you have to go straight to the bank or something. Venmo, Zelle, that is the currency of this generation. Now when I give, $100 birthday gifts to nieces and nephews, I do it over Zelle. I do it over, one of these apps, because that's the way to do it. It's interesting to see, sometimes you can see almost in a social media way, the other things they're doing with their account, giving $6 for a coffee to this one, giving $4 for half a sandwich to that one. Things that you and I would just do with cash in the old days, right? If you paid for my coffee, I'd just give you a $5 bill. So their reliance on digital is kind of frightening, right? Well, frightening to me. When I heard about the CrowdStrike issue, right, and that banks weren't working, I'll be honest, my husband and I keep cash in the house, for just these kind of eventualities. They do happen. So I think there's huge generational differences. And I think banks are doing a pretty good job of making all types of banking available.
I really agree with that last statement. And I'm amazed at, some of those, like I remember Zelle, when I tried first to sign up for it, it was not a straightforward process. Venmo was very easy. The balancing the security with the convenience in banking of all things is really, really hard. And I've been impressed at how well the banks seem to be able to do that. I would guess that older people, that the biggest difference now is it's all electronic. It's just older people, it tends to be more web. Younger people, it tends to be more Apple. That would be my speculation.
I mean, we still have, like, my husband's father is still alive. He's 97. And obviously he's a physical bank person, right? And so some of these things, and he lives in a state, South Carolina, where there's just a lot of older people who retired, 30, 40 years ago. I think we're going to see the number of physical banks decline as these people age out, right? As people in their 90s and 80s and, by the 70s, getting near 70, we won't need them as much. And so as much as we've seen it decline, I think we'll see it decline more.
Yeah.
You know what? Let me throw something in. Sorry. I remember when I lived in the Netherlands, and this was in 98, 99, I had to get used to a world where they didn't use checks because they were so far ahead of us at the time. And it was confusing to me to figure out how to pay my electric bill. And, it was quite confusing to me. But obviously we've all gotten used to it now.
I had a similar experience back when I lived in China for almost a decade. I left China in 2017. And what you could see in the streets back in 2016, what is it now? It's 8 years ago. You could see beggars, not in the villages, but in Dongguan, in Shenzhen, medium-sized cities. You could see beggars with a QR code so that you could send them money via WeChat.
Oh my God.
Well, that was a different world there. But you know what? Everything you've said is pretty much what you see on the result. Let me share that and go full screen for a second. Mobile has exploded. It's actually, surprisingly, it's better for millennials than it is for Gen Z, but no surprises there. It's working super well. Mail and phone are slowly disappearing here. Phone, pretty obvious, even though you still have, one of the most surprising stuff I saw there is Gen Z is using some level of phone, actually more than some other generations. I don't even understand how that's possible. Mail, I didn't know mail was possible, but apparently it is. I still have many things to learn. And then branches and online are very generation related. You can see that based on the generation you're part of, you are really more keen to use one system over the other. The only thing that gets pretty much everyone aligned is mobile, which is all about convenience. And I guess the pandemic again had a huge role to play in all of that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. But I think it's really about time we get Sheila comfortable on the therapy couch, because now is story time.
Gather around, folks. It's time for guest CX Story.
All right. So, Sheila, make yourself comfortable. We want to hear everything about what has happened to you.
Okay, so let me start out with two characteristics of Sheila that support the story, right? One of them is that Sheila travels a lot. She travels for business and she travels for personal. Number two is Sheila loses stuff a lot, right? I'm on my third version of my license in the last 3 years. I lose stuff. And it's something I know about myself, and I plan for it. Okay. So a couple of weeks ago, and it's really quite a recent story, I'm getting ready to fly the next morning. Typically what I do is I have one small wallet, almost like a hand-sized wallet, like a coin purse you might use in the international markets. And in there I have my license, I have one credit card, some cash, right? Minimal things I might need. In a different place, I will have a full-size wallet, which has my passport in case I lose my license. I have another credit card in case I lose the pink purse. Both of which have happened. These are not unusual events. Sheila loses stuff. Anyway, so I'm getting ready. It's 9:30 in the evening. I have to leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning to meet my 7:20 flight. And I go through the little pink purse. And what I see is I don't have a Visa card in there. And I'm like, okay, where's my Visa card? And then this image goes through my mind of going through a drive-through at a pharmacy, giving them a credit card to pay, giving me back my drugs in a white bag with a bunch of paper, pages and pages of paper. And I said, where's the card? And she said, it's attached to the pills and all the white papers and all the papers about how you take this drug and all the ways it'll kill you. And it was actually in like a bank envelope. And I said, okay, that's in there. I got that. Fast forward 48 hours. My husband is going around saying, I'm going to the recycle center. Where's your paper? Where's your, I got this stack of papers from the pharmacy. I very diligently cut out my personal information because we do shred that and throw the rest away, right? Not remembering there's a credit card in there. Okay. So it's 9:30 and I'm like, okay, I have to report it. I just have to report a lost card. Let me go ahead and do this. And I do go to the phone, right? I mean, for something like that, I don't even conceive of using my mobile app to report a lost card. That just doesn't, and to try and get another one in some amount of time. Okay, so I call Chase Manhattan and I get a conversational AI interface, right? This is not an IVR, maybe front-ended by an IVR. I won't say that it isn't. And it asks me what I'm calling about. And one of the choices is lost or stolen card. Okay, get to there. They do some verifying who I am, right? First, they tell me my number has checked. I'm using a phone that's on my account. Check one. Some other checks along the way to verify who I am. And then they say, give me the credit card number. Give them the credit card number. Then they say, we're going to review the last 5 transactions that you made. So I scramble onto my PC to get the last 5. And they verify that all 5 of those last transactions were mine. And then they immediately go to, okay, we will record your lost card. That is now over. We will send you a new card. It will arrive in 3 to 5 days. Anything else? And I'm like, what? I don't have to talk to somebody? I have a lost card? And they're just going to send me a new one to my home address. Again, a safe way to do it. And I'm like, wow, that is impressive. I was beginning to end through this in about 5 or 6 minutes. Okay. Then I go to my big wallet, right? And in there is a Visa card, right? It's the Visa card I just canceled. Because I have a Visa card for Amazon that I use a lot and one for Marriott that I also use a lot. So then I have to get on the phone and do it again. But guess what? I did it a little faster. I knew the process. So I canceled 2 cards in about 10 minutes. Left town with just an American Express, which is fine. I still had backup. And when I arrived home from a mini break in New York, 4 or 5 days, I had 2 new cards. The other thing that was something that only happens now in the mobile world, I was able to use both of those cards using my phone because both of them are assigned in Apple Pay. Apple Pay was updated somehow by Chase. I don't even know how. They knew the number, even though I didn't. And so I was able to use those cards and pay for things that whole weekend, even though I didn't have the physical cards. So when I look back on that, I look at that is CX done right. It didn't take me, think about how long it would have taken in the past to report a card and to get a new, to do all of that without human involvement, and even to get that extra bit of being able to use those accounts when I wanted to. If I was in a Marriott hotel, I could actually still use it, So that's my good news CX story.
Well, that is refreshing. When was the last time we had a positive story, Max?
I think when I hit the deer with my car.
That's true.
It wasn't positive.
It wasn't a good story for the deer, yeah.
No deers were destroyed for this story, though.
So let me ask the two of you. Do you think that's a good news story? If you had gone through that same experience, would you say, that's a good experience?
Yeah, absolutely, I would. And the thing that strikes me is we opened here talking about last time and about silos, and within a company, the different groups weren't in sync and it didn't work. Now we've got organizations in sync that aren't even the same company.
Yep.
Which to me is really impressive, really unusual.
There are quite a few interesting things here. First, congratulations, you're part of the 2.4% who apparently prefer to use the phone in the US for that one.
What was my choice? Would you, if you lost your card, would you actually try to tell them on the mobile app?
Yeah, definitely. That was going to be my question. Why not the app? Because the reason for me is probably three things. First, I'm used to the app. I would not even know where to find the phone number. I would have to Google it, so I would waste time there. Second reason is I know how to do it on the app because I see the button so often every time I log in. They make it very prominent. And the third reason is I feel I would not have to identify myself while on the phone. I mean, it was easy for you in 5-6 minutes, but I would have the belief that it would take me half an hour to identify myself, and I would have to give way too much information. So I would probably give up even before starting. Why the phone? Why not the app in your case?
Okay, so remember those boomer numbers? I'm smack dab in the middle of the boomer group, right? So I still, apparently have these residual feelings that when something is security, basically that has security implications, which a lost card does, I think a human is going to be important in that transaction. And maybe that's also the reason that I'm impressed with the fact that I went to the phone and did it without a human.
So that's my question is, if you have it, when next you lose a card, it seems pretty safe to assume you will. Given that the phone turned out to be no more human than the app, would you go to the app next time or would you call again?
Well, it's interesting just listening to Julien. I don't see that on my app, right? To be honest, I use my online more than I use my app, right? I'm very online centric, right? I pay my bills that way. And again, if you think about millennials and Gen Zs, they do more of their bill paying and things with mobile, and I don't, right? So that's part of it. But I am apt now to go to my mobile app and see it. I mean, B of A is my bank. I don't see that prominently, but also I may not be on it as often as you are. When I need to check things, I click a button in my browser bookmarks. Yeah. So I'm less likely. So I'm in the online group, right? That's really my problem.
Your co-boomer is the same way. So
the follow-up question for me, sorry, I'm a little bit away from the CX topic here, but it's really out of curiosity. Why so many credit cards? If I have 2, it will be the maximum, and it's because I had no choice. I signed up for a new bank, and they gave me a card I didn't want. But why? And it seems to be a U.S. trend. I don't believe that's you specifically. Why do people in the US have multiple credit cards? What is the advantage of it?
So having two is usually where I am, right? For most of the time, I usually have something that is American Express and something that is Visa, right? Just because there are places, especially when you go overseas, where American Express doesn't work. There are, to me, advantages of American Express. There's no limit, right? I mean, literally, I could go and buy a $50,000 car if the dealer would let me do it and use my American Express because my credit has been established since 1981. They know I pay that bill. There is no limit. So they'd look at my, my scores and they would do it. I currently have the Platinum card on American Express, and it gives me some other privileges that all, to me, make up the cost of that card, right? And so I like my American Express card. I want to have an alternative. For many years, that's been Amazon. I do a lot of Amazon shopping, and we get 5% cash back on anything we spend on Amazon. So 5% cash back is not bad. And it's not cash back, it's Amazon back. But, 5% off anything, my husband and I buy. Although we keep separate credit cards, whatever, 5% off. So to me, there's value in that, right? I mean, when I need shampoo and conditioner, I buy it on Amazon. I mean, even fairly simple stuff, I will buy it on Amazon because typically I don't need it in the next hour. And for me, it's where I live. It's a 25-minute car ride to the local grocery store, right? I'm like 12 miles, including a highway, just to get to a drugstore. So I use a lot of Amazon. But after the pandemic, when the pandemic was on, I canceled my Marriott because I wasn't going to be using it. When the pandemic was over, I used it again. I got another one because, again, you get lots of stuff back in terms of points and things. And I tend to stay at a lot of Marriotts during the course of a year, just the whole chain, right? And so that loyalty back in terms of, it works for me. For example, Max and I are taking a trip to Africa together in October. I assume you're coming, Max?
Yes, I am.
And on the way, I'm stopping in Scotland for a couple of days with my sister and staying at a Renaissance in Edinburgh, with the points that I get from my Marriott card. So that's why I have a loyalty factor. Yeah.
It's funny. My wife has Amazon. I have American Airlines, which gets me the club, which is a lot cheaper than if you buy the club from American, which is a head scratcher, except I guess they get paid for the credit card stuff. Mm-hmm. My wife has another reason to have cards on top of that, and that is she's the sort of person that when they give you a big introductory deal, like, enough miles for a flight, she'll do it. She'll cancel. She'll get the whatever the incentive is, and then she'll just cancel the card. I can't do that. I'll just have that card out there, and I'll be paying fees on it for years. I'm just like, I don't do that. But
we've seen that with your internet and TV channel package in a previous episode.
Yes. We've spoken of my issue around this one.
Speaking of that one, just tangentially, I am this close to killing my landline. Now you'll say, Julien, you have a landline? Again, I worked at AT&T. Both my husband and I, our fathers worked in the Bell system. They were both at Western Electric. And so we have this thing about having a phone. In fact, in our home, we have two landlines. My husband has one and I have one. But the price of it is now higher than my mobile phone, which also gives me internet and, access to films and data and Excel spreadsheets and everything. So my local phone now has gone to $78 a month. Ooh. And I'm ready to kill it. I'm ready to kill it.
I may surprise you, but I'm not surprised you have a landline because I do have a landline as well. Okay. I'm more surprised that you're actually using it because we have a landline because it's mandatory. It's part of the package. You can't have just the internet. They will sell you just the internet more expensive than internet plus TV plus landline. So you take it, but I haven't used a landline in a good decade at least, but I have one. I could not tell you what my number is, and there is no phone attached to it. But I do have a landline number.
Well, and I think before the takeoff of video conferencing, there was more reason to have one. I live in a remote area. My mobile service is not that good, right? And technology wasn't as good. Like today, my mobile phone can be backed up by my Wi-Fi, right? And so it boosts the signal, but I didn't have that. So I needed quality for business calls. I no longer need that because I can do a Zoom call. I can do a WebEx call. I can do,
a ring center.
Yeah, I had a similar situation to Julian's where I was saving $25. I literally had my landline because I was getting $25 a month in. But above and beyond that, I do have a dial phone here handy in my office.
So right in my
just in case. I don't have anything to plug it into anymore, but I still have it.
So before you make me
on mine, so it wouldn't ring during our call.
Before you make me any younger than I am, I've been using that for a while, and I know how to use it. So don't you challenge me there.
That's good.
And another question I had for you, Sheila, was you decided to go with the phone, not the app. Yet you were surprised it took only 5-6 minutes. What did you? So first of all, you expected you talk to a human, not to a machine. Okay, but why did you expect it would take longer? And why were you surprised in the end? Did you have bad experiences in the past, or?
Yeah, I would say it's not that I had bad experiences. I just thought there'd be a lot more identification qualification, right? So it was just my expectation it would take about a half hour to do it.
But you knew your credit card number, which is something, if I lose my credit card, I guarantee I can't tell you what my number is. How did you have it somewhere in a third or fourth purse? How did you get that?
So because I do a lot of internet shopping, right? And sometimes I need that number, even though it's, in some browsers and Safeways and whatever. I do have it in my contact list. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I have the full.
Could
And I also have the customer service number.
Hey, I wanted to put on our analysts' hats.
Okay.
And Julien, you're an analyst adjunct. The other side of this is, let's talk about the benefits to the bank, because they didn't have to pay someone to talk to you to do that. And it sounds like it was a very good customer experience. So they're building loyalty through something like that. So,
and you didn't send 2 emails and 5 WhatsApps and 2 faxes to try to get it fixed, which is less volume to handle for the contact center as well. So yeah, tons of benefits here. Sorry for interrupting.
And for the banks, it's we talked about how they tend to be technology forward. When I think about IVR, when it first started, it was with banks. And it was those simple things about, did my check clear? And did my deposit come, is my deposit done? Whatever. And so they were very early. Think about ATMs. Again, banks were very early with that kind of mobile kiosk kind of applications. And so and when we think about why, I think of volume, right? Everybody has to bank. All of us have to somehow handle money. And so, it's the total addressable market is everybody in the world, right? When you right? And so, the benefits of automation are just so clear. As you said, we take a human out of that loop and we have saved lots and lots and lots of live minutes, right?
Well, what I remember in the 90s was there'd be someone who had a checking account that had a $2.50 a month fee, and they would make twice monthly $5 calls to cost the bank $5. So the bank was spending $10 a month telling this guy, yes, your check is in your account.
Mhm.
and they were only getting $2.50 back. So talk about incentive.
Yeah, and we both know, Max, and you as well, Julien, that the technology to deploy what they did, and this was not, it was conversational AI, but it was not Gen AI, right? It wasn't a complete conversation. I didn't just say, I lost this card. I need to, no. I went through menu steps, right? But they were smarter than IVR steps, right? And that's the whole move, I think, from IVR to conversational AI. It just opens up the proportion of interactions that we can do automatically, right? And to me, Gen AI does the same thing, right? If we started with IVR and said, in 20 or 30 years, we automated 5% of the things that people used to do by calling somebody, with conversational AI Gen 1, let's just call it, maybe another 10% of interactions, which again is fantastic. And then you think about what we can do with really natural speech and generative AI. I'm in the 30 to 40% camp. Where are you, Max?
At least 40. I could see even 50. And I think 30 to 40 in the next 2-3 years. I think 7-8 years out, it's 50% or more.
Yeah, I mean, 2 to 3 years, I think, for certain industries, use cases. I'm saying 5, probably more for the general, sort of everybody, all the industries.
I get excited and forget how contact centers are to adapt new technology. So
local government,
Yeah.
But and again, now that you have that experience, you've tried the phone twice because
back to back.
Unfortunately, you had to do it twice. If you were to check your app tomorrow and realize that there is a button there and that it's actually simple, do you think you're still going to stick to the phone because you've done it twice? It's working. It's 5 minutes. It's not that long. Or would you try the app next time because it's probably just 30 seconds to a minute versus 5 or 6 minutes?
I would definitely try the app next time. I was not really aware that I could do that. I didn't expect that I could do that. And it wasn't, like you say, it's right there on your app. I see transfer checks, deposit checks. I mean, I deposit using my app when I do get a check from somebody, but I don't ever remember seeing that. Report a lost or stolen card.
I think it's very interesting to check all the different call it platforms or methods that the bank has to offer, because I have that experience using HSBC Hong Kong that has a website. You need to be an engineer to navigate that thing. It's insane of complexity, but their app, incredibly straightforward and simple. And it's the same bank, just the interface is completely different. So it might be that in your case, actually, the phone is incredibly efficient and maybe the app is not that efficient, but very, very appreciative that you've...
So on that note, my bank app does have like some Erica is supposed to be able to answer my questions. I would never think, even now, to go to Erica and say, Erica, I want to cancel my thing. Because I think of Erica as being very simple FAQ. But I, just has a short list of questions that she can answer. But I think going forward with Gen AI, I will be able to, and I will trust it more. But today, I don't trust it.
Yeah. And I think the path will be from a narrow FAQ to a very broad, almost anything you can think of FAQ. And then, and it's ironic because generative doesn't really enable the transaction stuff. That's stuff we've been able to do for years. Yeah. But
it's how quickly we
can
an
interface that makes that flow.
Yep.
So typically in the CX therapy, we end an episode by asking the guest, do you feel any better? But in your case, well, you didn't feel bad to start with. So I probably just asked, do you still have all your cards with you? Are you confident for your next trip?
Yes. And in fact, I'm going to Quebec City on Sunday. And I feel confident that all 3 cards are available to take if I need them. Yes. But you
All right.
reminded me, I should make sure I've got my passport. Order. Yeah.
Well, if you do ever lose a card and decide to use the app, we would love to have you on the couch again to hear about that story and how it went. Hopefully you will need to, and you won't lose a card on your next trip.
Excellent. I'll keep you all abreast.
Good. We'll be sitting staring at our screens.
Well, Max, Sheila, thank you very much both for joining us today. Thank you, Sheila, for the positive, refreshing story. That's a change. And the fresh cut flowers signature with you. Thank you, everyone who is watching this episode today. Looking forward to the next one in a month's time. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sheila.